Hello, my name is Claire, and welcome to Green Living Podcast. This first episode is all about what this podcast is about, the sustainable habits I have right now, goals for the future, the reason I want to live sustainably, and what you can do to start living sustainably right now. This podcast is going to be a place where I can chat about sustainable living, zero waste living, and a little sprinkle of minimalism. It's going to be a mini diary of my journey with living a more sustainable life, and hopefully, I will be able to get a few interviews with people here and there. I have recently decided to make a lot of lifestyle changes, and the biggest being living more sustainably. I wanted to share my journey through this change. Over the past few years, I've made decisions that I thought were helping lower my carbon footprint, and I've subscribed to services that I thought were helping keep plastic out of the oceans. However, in doing research, I now realize a lot of them are not helping the environment at all. Recently in quarantine, I've been able to reflect on everything I have and that I use, and I'm just so overwhelmed with how much trash I produce and the ingredients and packaging on things that I have. So I decided that I need to really commit on this sustainable journey and really evaluate and change lifelong habits. So this podcast is really the beginning journey of a huge lifestyle change for myself. And I hope that I am able to give some helpful tips of what to try and what not to try as I experience them myself. I realize that we are all at different stages of sustainability, and if I give a tip that does not seem feasible to you, that is fine. Do whatever you can do and feel comfortable doing. So, before we break the champagne bottle on the hull of this podcast ship, I want to say that this podcast is a safe space where I talk and possibly guests talk about their experiences with sustainable and zero waste lifestyles. The sustainable living lifestyle can be intimidating, and at times seeing people on the internet or in your everyday life may make you feel that you are harming the planet with everything you do, and any sort of sustainable decision you try to make isn't a great one. That is not true. I think if you even try a little bit, that is amazing. The main message of this first episode is to just do the best that you can. That is all we can do, and that is all that I will be able to do moving forward. I know there are a lot of different options about how to be a more conscious consumer and how to live zero waste. Now, one thing I will say about zero waste is that I know I will never be zero waste unless I decide to live completely off the grid and hunt and gather everything for myself. That is not feasible for me. This journey is more of a this is more of a goal. It is more of a goal to become as close to zero waste as I feel I can comfortably be. This journey is not going to be perfect, and I know I will make mistakes. I do embrace different opinions and suggestions. No one is doing anything perfectly when it comes to being sustainable, but I just ask that people be gentle and kind to one another. I want this experience to also be a mental break and cleanse from certain consumeristic habits that I have and most people have. I am guilty of buying fast fashion in the past and purchasing too many beauty products without using them up before I've tossed them. And the first step I'm taking is using everything that I already have. So if there's a lotion I've had for forever, I'm just going to use it all up. I think that that's the most sustainable thing to do in the beginning, is just use what you already have. And I think the biggest thing I have found researching and incorporating into my life is reuse, reuse, and reuse again. I've noticed this in my kitchen habits, and I have been reusing jars that, jams or pickles or whatnot have come in. They're really amazing glass jars that you can reuse to put in oats or, rice or whatnot. So I think, reduce, reuse, recycle is amazing. And I think reuse, reuse, and reuse again is that next step. And that is where my goal is, at least in this first phase of my journey. And what I'm doing at the moment to be more sustainable is I've actually been doing this for the past 6 years now, purchasing products not tested on animals. That's the first thing I look for when I look at products. They usually have like a bunny and it says cruelty free on it, and I'm gonna probably do a whole podcast and possible blog post about that. But that's what I look for, especially in makeup and body products, is that it's cruelty free. Another thing I do is reusable bags for grocery shopping. I've been doing this for a while, and the state I live in just started, you have to pay like 10 cents for plastic bags. So I'm happy that they're starting to do that, because that's a big incentive to buy a reusable bag as well. Recycle. I think my biggest tip for recycling is to contact your local recycling plant or whatever company picks up your recycling, and usually they have information about what can be recycled, what can't. Sometimes you have to take, the lid off of something, and the lid can be recycled and the body can't, or the body can, or vice versa. So, and usually they have like information online for all of that as well. I know where I am, we use like a numbering system, so like 1, 2, that sort of thing. So the next thing, I already kind of mentioned it, is upcycling. So jars, bags, etc. That's kind of where the reuse comes into play again, and I'm a big fan of upcycling. As I've been starting to upcycle, especially glass jars, immediately when a glass jar comes into the house now, even if it's full of, jelly or something, I'm just excited to be used up so I can get the jar. And I've upcycled in the past week a soy sauce glass bottle. I did do a jelly jar, oil, there's some olive oil, and yeah, so that can be anything from jars to bags you have, etc. And the next thing is reusable water bottle. I honestly can't remember when I started using a reusable water bottle. I live in a part of the US that is thankfully very eco-friendly, and I probably started using a reusable water bottle when I was 10, maybe. I think I remember I got a purple Nalgene wide mouth. And yeah, I love it. I've started at a young age, I guess, in terms of that, doing reusable water bottles. I have an army of them now, which is a point that I also want to make, that if you already have a reusable water bottle, don't go out and get another one. Just use what you have, unless, there's a huge hole in it somehow, or it's leaking, or it just isn't right. Chances are, because so many companies and, like fun runs and so many goodie bags now include reusable water bottles. And if you my tip is if you don't like the actual look of it, or if you don't like that there is a brand on it, just get your own sticker and put it on there. That's been my kind of a hobby I do is when I travel, I look for different stickers that I can put on my water bottle, kind of like a mini scrapbook. So when I take out my reusable water bottles, I can see different places that I've been. And yeah, I love reusable water bottles. I think personally for me, my favorite ones are Nalgene and Camelback. I know those are bigger brands. They might be more expensive for some, but those are, I've had a Camelback for like, ooh, almost 10 years now, and the Nalgene's I've had for maybe 15 years. They're built to last. The next is using natural light instead of using lights when plausible. I'm a huge proponent of natural sunlight. I really don't like artificial lights in general, and when I eventually purchase a house or if I'm able to build a house, that's my biggest thing is I'm going to try and use as much natural light as I can because that's going to save so much energy. And I think the natural light is so much, for me, better for my mental health. And that might not be plausible for everyone. I know apartments, a lot of apartments sometimes don't have a lot of natural light or a lot of windows. So, as I said before, it's whatever you can do. And the next is shopping at local farmers markets. So, this can be tricky for people because of location and seasonal conditions. I know I'm only able to go to a farmer's market usually from about March to October, which is a lot of time that I'm able to go. Some people don't have any farmers markets locally, but I highly suggest if you are on vacation and around one, or you do have a local one, that you check them out for fresh produce, especially. I also like to keep a list of different household items that I know I will need or want eventually, and then I go and support the local farmers market if they have anything like that. Now, sometimes farmers market prices can be higher for maybe homemade goods, but for produce in general, I find that they're absolutely amazing. And the biggest thing I try to look for when I go to a farmer's market is local honey. I love farmers market honey. I find it so much better than just store-bought honey, and if it is local, then that will help with allergies due to local pollen and the bees being local. And I I don't remember how long I've been going to farmers markets, but they're absolutely amazing, especially if there's a local restaurant that has a tent at a farmer's market. I found that when I went to the local farmer's market near our old house, that you really get to know, the owner might be there or the chef that's always there. You get to know them, and then if you ever go into their restaurant, it's a much closer and like more family feeling, I guess. And also it gets you outside, which I love. I love being outside and shopping. It's kind of a weird thing. And the last thing that I'm incorporating right now is purchasing secondhand. So I know there's a lot of stigmas around thrift stores and or secondhand items, and I don't want to dive too deep into it right now, but I am definitely a I'm definitely guilty of being more stuck up when it comes to thrift stores. When I was younger, I never wanted to go into them, and I thought that I guess I was above a thrift store, but now that I've gotten older, I think that they're such a treasure trove for almost anything. I really can't talk highly enough about them. Now, I think there are pros and cons to buying from a thrift store, and I know I will talk about this in future episodes, but they some items are have the sticker, the original, price tag on them, and someone might have bought it or gotten a gift that they didn't like and then they gave it to a thrift store. So I've actually found that in a thrift store run, maybe about 20 to 30% of items that I've come into contact with while shopping were practically brand new and or never worn or used. That's not to say I'm going to go and buy like socks and underwear are a limit for me when it comes to thrift stores, but I find a lot of glassware or a lot of kitchen items are actually quite nice. Now, I usually tend to stay away from furniture. Personally, some that I have found are fine, and some actually have the original price tag on them. I personally am allergic to cats, so I get wary of secondhand furniture or fabric items that can absorb like odors and whatnot, because I don't want to bring something into my space that has any sort of cat hair or anything like that, or saliva, because that will um, not be great for my allergies, for my cat allergies. But there's so many fun finds, and my secret tip that I always do usually around Halloween, because Halloween is probably my favorite holiday, is I love DIYing crafts and decorations for Halloween, and thrift stores are amazing for if you need a component of a craft or you just need something that's a little odd, if that makes sense. I know a lot of things at the thrift store might seem outdated or a little odd to you, to most people, but I've I've actually found almost half of my Halloween decorations at the thrift store that have either been perfect as is. For example, I found a random fake um, green beetle in a frame, and that was perfect. That was as is. I just put it on the mantle, and I love it. I think I had to do a couple touch up paint, a little touch up paint around the frame because it was a little chipped, but that was easy. And I had another DIY craft I needed to find a candelabra, and so they're very expensive new, and I didn't need a fancy one because it was going to be out for a month at a time. And so I found one that held three candles, large candles, and it was brown, and I painted it black, and it already had some fake little jewels on it, and it's perfect. So that's probably my deep, that's probably my number one tip, especially for decorating for holidays, especially if you can make it something your own and upcycle it. That's my favorite thing to do around Halloween. And on to my starting goals. I would love to lower my plastic consumption. That is probably my number one goal right now. My next is be an aware consumer. I think people forget how much power consumers have, and if a product is not selling as well as a company wants, or if people start pushing back about company policies or something in the supply chain, that is going to get their attention very quickly because they don't want to lose customers. That is kind of the culmination of what I want this podcast and my blog and anything I put out to be, is just be an aware consumer. Question the company, question their values, their mission statement, all those. If they're not lining up, then something's wrong. I know a lot of companies don't disclose their supply chain, which is fine for a company to protect themselves and to protect their supply chain, but if they're are illegal acts, or if there's anything unethical in their supply chain, then that needs to be brought up. And as a consumer, even if it was a brand that I was a diehard for, I would completely stop until they either addressed it, changed it, or if they didn't, then I would no longer be a consumer of that product. And my next one is I want to lower my carbon footprint. And this is a new one for me. I haven't tracked my carbon footprint ever. And I know that there are websites where you can put in what you do in a day or a month and see what that carbon footprint is. I know there's some, I don't remember the company right off the top of my head, but you can go and basically pay back what you've used for your carbon footprint. And I'd like to do a lot more research into that. I know if you're planning a trip, let's say you're flying somewhere, you can put in everything you're going to do, how far you're going to fly, and it'll tell you what that carbon footprint will be, which is really cool. And I'd like to do some more research into that. I would really like to reduce my water use. And so my reduced water use is mainly for products that package a lot of water in them and products that use a lot of water to make, so such as dishwasher soap or dish soap. I can't remember the exact percentage, but there's a large percentage that you're just purchasing water, and then a small percentage of the actual product is in there to help clean the dishes. And that goes along with just being an aware consumer, how much water is in the actual product and how much water has been used to make that product as well. And my last big goal as of right now is to reuse as much as possible. This is going to be a theme throughout everything I probably post. I think we are surrounded by so many usable goods that we might not even see. And so I think it's also a mental change in seeing a glass jar and saying, oh, actually, I can reuse that for food. I can reuse that to be a planter. I can reuse that to hold makeup brushes. I think switching my mind to upcycle as much as possible is going to be a big goal for me. What makes me passionate about living more sustainably, my number one right now, are animals. And I've loved animals. I've always loved animals. And I think about specifically marine life. I think, all of these single use plastic items or all this trash that we're throwing away, you know, that's going into their environment. That's what they're starting to eat. It's starting to go up the food chain. And I just wonder, would I or would you want trash to fill your house? Because that's basically what we're doing by throwing so much plastic and trash into the ocean, is that is their home. And if you took all of the single-use plastic that you use and put it throughout your house instead of throwing it away, it would build up and you wouldn't be able to move. So I always think, why am I willing to dirty or put this trash in someone else's environment when of course I'm throwing it away because I don't want it in my environment. And that is how I imagine our oceans right now, that it's their home and they're being overwhelmed with trash that is coming into their environment, and it's killing a lot of animals, and it's not giving them any sort of benefits. It's not helping the marine life at all. It's not, adding to their value of life. And I just wonder, would you want someone to come by one day and just dump all of their trash in your home, and then you have to come home to that and then try to adapt to that new lifestyle, because that's not plausible for anyone. My second thing that makes me passionate about sustainability is having a healthy earth for all. What has really pushed me into the next phase of living more sustainably and a more sustainable lifestyle is the pandemic. I've had a chance to really question my living habits and my thinking as a consumer. One of the biggest motivators for me is I saw an image only about a month into quarantine of a mask and a couple single use gloves on the ocean floor. And that triggered something in me to reflect and see what impact I have on this earth. I couldn't believe how quickly those were found in the ocean. And I understand that people have been wearing masks and use single use gloves and, these PPEs for years in the medical field or in people's daily lives. But just for me, that just clicked something that, wow, all of these masks, all of these gloves, all of these PPEs, that's where they're going to end up. There's nowhere else unless people start recycling them, upcycling, trying to have some sort of program in place so that they don't go into the ocean. I just thought that was so fast. Even if it's an old one, for me, it just made that connection that that is where it's going to go and that's where it's going to live for years and years, probably past until we're all gone. Um, so that was something, and it ties back again to the marine life. But I think just a healthy earth for all is what's really important to me. And the third thing that makes me passionate about living more sustainably right now is living more of a minimal lifestyle mentally and physically. There's so much mind junk and physical junk that so many of us carry around with us. I have found that I feel the most free when I have done a purge or cleaning of my mind and of physical things. So, for physical belongings, I'm not saying I want to have a capsule wardrobe because, in my opinion, I think that those are really boring. But I think when you start to eliminate unwanted items or styles, that is when you find your true style and your true self. This also goes along with the mental side that I will not get into too much detail because I am not an expert, but I feel that when you are able to declutter your mind with things, you can relax more and start to tune in with your true self. So, with all of that, some suggestions to start right now. Whether or not you can make all or none of these changes right away, I think the first step for everyone is to evaluate your surroundings and habits. I think this can be plausible for a beginner, for someone who has been doing it for years, and someone who has been living sustainably for decades, just always kind of checking in and evaluating surroundings and habits. So this is the first starting point, I would say, is kind of a mini project, is to collect all that you can single-use plastics that you use in a week. This can be plastic from in a box from an online order, plastic used for food, any sort of single-use plastic that you encounter. And I would suggest either having a box or a bag and collect all of the plastic in there. Just throw it in. I'm doing this right now, and I just put a bag in the kitchen, and I just throw all single-use plastics that I have encountered in that bag. You can do this for a week, a month, or maybe a few months. It's up to you. The only thing is, I would suggest doing a week to start off and then moving into doing it for a month because this will give you a better idea, especially if you have monthly subscriptions or monthly habits that 1 week might not be able to pick up on. If you know that you do encounter a lot of single use plastics, the whole month will encapsulate most of that you come into contact with if you have monthly habits. And I would suggest doing it for more than one day, since every day is different, and a week or month will give you a better idea of your overall plastic intake. Because if you choose a random Wednesday, you actually might only come into 2 single-use items, plastic items, and that the next day on Thursday, you come into 10, but you only took it for Wednesday. You only collected it for Wednesday, so I don't think that would give you an overall picture of what the plastic intake is for you. So I think the best would be to do a month, but I would say just start with a week to see how that looks. And if this is too much to start off with, or you do not have room to keep all of the plastic, or whatever your situation is, then just take a photo, if you are able to, of each single-use plastic item that you come into contact with for a week. Or if you do decide to do it for a whole month and you do not have room, I would also suggest just taking a photo of everything. And I think this can also help you visualize, if it's not actually physically there, a large bag of single-use plastic, when the month is up, let's say, if you go through and scroll through all of the photos of the single-use plastic that you've used, and I suggest taking a photo of each individual plastic item instead of just one big one, because I want the feeling of each single one matters. Each single one is going somewhere where it really shouldn't be, going into the ocean or going into a landfill, because the overall picture might look, if you take one overall picture of all of the plastic, yes, it might look like a lot, but if you scroll through and just keep scrolling for a week or a month's plastic, I feel that will be more beneficial to see your overall intake than just one large picture. And if you do decide to collect physical items or take pictures of them, I would love to see them on Twitter at greenlivingpod. I'm going to also be doing this. I've started doing a week, and then I decided I'm also going to do a month and see how that looks. And I will also be sharing my plastic intake, because even though I've made a lot of decisions to not purchase items because of how much plastic is in them, I am still amazed with just after 1 week how much single-use plastic is coming into my life. Now, most of the single-use plastic that is coming into my life, I already have plans for how I'm going to upcycle it or reuse it, but just the fact that I have so much already in a week is very disheartening. So yes, please tweet me at greenlivingpod with your photo when you decide to finish, and just say, oh, this was 1 week, or this was a month, or this was 2 months, because I'd really love to see, and I think it's a good indicator of how much plastic you're actually consuming. Now, I realize there are so many other resources that we are depleting that we encounter in our everyday lives. However, plastic is one of the worst, since it takes years to break down, and in some cases, it never breaks down. I am writing a blog post that will be coming out soon about microplastics in the ocean. I'm no expert, but the research that I found about microplastics specifically in the ocean is mind-blowing. So please look out for that, and I will mention when that will be live. And on that note, I believe that will end the first podcast for Green Living. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm very excited for this journey and what it will bring. So my social medias for the podcast, you can find this podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest, and the handle is at greenlivingpod. That's greenlivingpod. And I also have a blog that is greenlivingpod.blogspot.com, and it will also be linked on my social media platforms. The last thing I wanted to mention is that my sister Caitlin did my beautiful cover art for my podcast, and so thank you, Caitlin, for my beautiful, beautiful cover art. And another thank you to my oldest friend, Natalia, for creating my intro and outro music. Thank you so much.